Hello, and welcome to Workplace Stories, the podcast where human capital experts share their real-world experiences and insights. Hosted by Red Thread Research, Workplace Stories surfaces the latest industry trends, innovative talent strategies, and best practices for success. Tune in for practical advice on how to best transform your workplace.
Welcome to Workplace Stories. I'm Stacia Gar.
And I'm Danny Johnson.
And we just finished a conversation with Dessalen Wood, who is the CHRO at Syntax. We were talking all about the pressures and opportunities of AI. Danny, what are some of your key takeaways?
I mean, the first, I think, is just her optimism. She is an incredibly optimistic person. One thing that she said up front that really resonated with me is people should listen to me because I live in the present. She doesn't look back. She doesn't look forward. She addresses what's in front of her, which is as far as I think anybody can hope for right now. That's just where we are. She said a couple of other things that were really interesting as well. A lot of organizations have fear around AI, and she said that her organization had gotten through that by early hackathons. So introducing things and then just immediately saying, all right, let's do this all together so that the fear was overcome there. As well as she said she recently dropped a Valentine in the Slack channel and said, all right, do better. And her team was able to create these much, much better Valentines because of the things that they're learning with AI. And so I thought that the way that they are handling it and the fact that they're taking fear out of the discussion was really, really interesting. The other thing that I thought was interesting, and I think you're going to talk a little bit about their roadmap in general, but things that didn't make the roadmap were not necessarily discarded. They were just given to champions who then tried to find a way to make them doable. So if an AI project came in and it required all kinds of money and development and interactions between departments and things like that, the teams would work with those AI champions to get it down to something that was still very valuable and could do a lot of what they wanted to do originally, but didn't necessarily take all of the resources that they thought it would. What was interesting for you?
Yeah, I think that point was definitely of interest. She talked about how they set their roadmap and what things they were going to do kind of corporate wide, which we call big AI, and then which things were maybe a little bit, they may have been corporate AI, but they weren't really kind of ready for prime time, or they weren't, broad enough or whatever. And then their mechanism for thinking through what could and could not get done on a departmental level. And I think that actually ties really nicely into one of the other things she said that stood out to me, which is she said that by and large, we seem to have this belief that we can use AI in the same way across the entire organization to drive impact, but she doesn't see it that way. She sees it as three distinct areas of focus, one being the company itself. So she said, that's all about us, or different departments or different functions, et cetera. There are our customers. So how are we driving impact for them, particularly with the products or services? And then third is, how are we actually going to transform the way we do business? And the way that you use AI in each of those three different situations is different. And I haven't really heard anybody else say it quite that way. The other thing I wanted to mention is we asked her a question about what does AI readiness mean? And she said that, 9 months ago, it was completely different. It was probably more about kind of like skill readiness, et cetera. Today, what she sees it as is you have really strong clarity on which particular parts of the business you're going to drive value to through AI, and you have a plan for, even if it's not like in a dollars and cents measurement, but you have a plan for how you're going to know if you got there. So there's 6 to 8 areas you're going to focus on, you're going to see the impact, and that's how you know you have a plan for that, and that's how you know you're ready for AI. So those were some really good things. The whole conversation I thought was really good. She's incredibly pragmatic, which I think we both really appreciated. So
agreed.
Hope all of you enjoy this conversation with Dessalen, a view of AI from the CHRO seat, and we look forward to hearing your comments after you have a listen. Welcome, Dessalen, to Workplace Stories. We are so glad to finally have you on the show.
I'm really glad to be here, and I'm just excited for the conversation.
Us too. So let's begin by having you tell us just a bit about yourself and your work.
Wonderful. So right now, currently, I'm the Chief People Officer at Syntax, and we're a global solutions provider that basically modernizes businesses and bring them to the cloud. And we have professional services and IT services. But the interesting thing is I didn't start out in tech. In fact, I spent close to 20 years of my 25 plus years career in the retail and services industry, which is a very different kind of industry with like frontline workers and store managers, and even in some of my different company unions. And I had really perfected that kind of HR because I grew up in retail as a store manager and as a district manager and then as a trainer. And so I ended up having an opportunity when I left my company Cineplex to work for a HR tech firm that was one of my providers. So I went to work for them as their chief people officer. It was a new role, and I was doing a combination of building up their people and culture team, but at the same time, representing the product, working with customers, developing the product, and doing marketing, basic startup stuff. But from somebody who'd been in all public companies, kind of crazy. VC backed is a different business, a different animal. And I definitely lived a whole other life. I believe in parallel universes. It's like I jumped into another universe where a different version of me lived. And then it was interesting because the pandemic hit and we had like Black Lives Matter and vaccines and remote work and mental health. And I was working with more consulting with CHROs using our product to crowdsource opinions of their companies and interpreting their data. And I felt like there's a transformation happening that if I don't go and do this job, I would be relevant anymore because the job has completely changed. And there's like a renaissance where everything is being reinvented. And I can either get into the parade or I can watch the parade. And so even though I was having a great time, I had an opportunity where a global tech services company came for me. And I joke that it kind of erased all my retail background. And suddenly I was like a tech CHRO. And I was like, look at me, unexpected to say the least. And it's a global company and based in my hometown of Montreal. So it was such a wonderful opportunity. I jumped at it. And 4 years later, I'm still having a great time.
Awesome. Today we're going to talk about AI. I don't know if you've heard about this thing called AI, but we want to get into it. But before we do that, just tell the audience why they should listen to you with respect to AI.
I would see it's a funny thing because you could ask yourself the same question every day. Because when you're talking about something everybody's talking about, you're like, what does it matter what I have to say? And I think the best thing I can say is I describe myself as like a presentist. So I think there's sort of three conversations that are happening. One is, people who are nostalgic for the way things were. They're the ones who were freaking out about remote work, and now they're freaking out about AI. And they're like, remote work was that we're killing culture, and now it's everybody's job is going to be gone, doomsday clicking. And then there's the futurists who are talking about like what's going to come and what skills are we going to need and what's going to happen. And I'm just like here in the now. Here's what's happening right now. Here's what we need to be doing right now. Here's what I'm seeing right now. So I'm really just grounded in that. I'm not worried about the past. I'm not trying to pretend I can know what's going to happen 6 months or 6 years from now. But I can tell you what's going on right now.
So I actually really, really love that answer, both from a sort of Zen point of view, but also from what's going on in the space right now, because nobody can predict the future. But I'm really curious about how you stay there. How do you stay in the now and not look at the backward or go forward?
It is a skill I think you have when I'm a really practical person. I think if you ask me for advice, I really just give you like, here's what I think. And if you ask me what my company's doing, whatever I'm doing, you probably could pull that together in a couple of months because I'm really existing in the material world that we have now. And so when it comes to something like AI, I look at the tools that we have and I look at the challenges we have and I look at, the mindset shifts that are going on. And I try to bring the best response to that situation to the organization right now. That's really how I'm looking at it. And so I'm able to then evolve because I'm not in love with anything I did because I realize it won't last and I'm going to have to be able to iterate on it because whatever it is will be irrelevant very soon.
I dig it.
So let's talk a little bit about this moment and some of those challenges that you just mentioned. So you're a head of HR, fast-moving tech environment. What are some of the AI conversations that are landing on your desk right now from the CEO, the board, employees?
It's an interesting one because I would actually say there's three conversations when I'm thinking about it. There's the conversation that I think is going to happen at the CEO and board level, which is really around, the idea of how are we transforming our products and services to differentiate and gain more market share. So how is AI going to get us more top line? And then there's how is AI going to transform how we to make us more efficient and get us more margins or bottom line. So I think those conversations are happening during any kind of change in an organization. How can we do better with what we deliver and differentiate, and how we can save money from that side? And then I'd say the third conversation, which is probably the one most CHROs hear the most frequently, is how are we enabling our people to understand how to use this tool for their own personal productivity gain and to remain relevant. And in fact, there's three different kinds of strategies depending which conversation you're having, but all three of them are happening simultaneously right now for me.
So just to focus on that a little bit more, when we've been thinking in our research about how technology tends to impact, we often start with kind of baseline efficiency, like let's just take the low-hanging fruit, to use another consulting jargon term, take the easier stuff and focus there. And then at some point, we may be trying to kind of do some incremental involvement or evolving of the products that we have. But then kind of that next level after that is really, in some ways, rethinking the problem and what an appropriate outcome or solution might be. Being, I often use this example of maps. So kind of level 1 efficiency is you literally have a map. Level 2 efficiency was that we had GPS. Level 3 efficiency was that we have GPS with traffic overlaid on it. And then I think kind of level 4 is rethinking the problem, which is fundamentally transportation from one place to another. And that's like a Waymo, right? You're not even driving. You're not even responsible. So as you think about what you were just talking about, top line growth, bottom line efficiency, and then kind of enablement, are any of those kind of let's call them level 3 and 4 in reimaginings, I think maybe is the right word? Are you thinking about any of that?
I think it's an interesting one to talk about, this reimagining idea, because typically when technologies were introduced, if you think of how they were introduced to do a certain thing to a certain group of people. And the people who introduced the technology were telling you how it should be used, how it should be optimized, and what it looks like when it's being used right. And I would say with AI, it's like the opposite. It just was introduced, and then you're supposed to figure out how to use it and what it looks like when it's being done right. And everybody's got their own version of what right was. And I'm going back like 18 months to last year, where anybody could show you something, you'd be like, wow, that's how I use it. Oh wait, no, that's how I use it. Oh wait, look at how that company's using it. There was no one guru of this is how AI looks like when it's optimized to transform businesses, to transform your product, or to improve your people. You have to figure it out yourself. And so I think for me, that's the first time I've been involved in something like this, where we can redefine any day the best way to use it, because that's up for debate. So when you ask in terms of how to use it to reimagine, I would say, I think at first it was like everybody's job's going to be reimagined, but then how people were using it was really just productivity. Like a search engine. And people were getting a bit disappointed, saying it has so much more capability for reimagination. How come we're so unimaginative? Type of thing. And I would say, well, typically you would have used it for a while in this way, and then you would have evolved. But we're supposed to be learning to use it and also be reimagining our entire job at the same time. That's a little unrealistic. I'm just going to put it out there. It's unrealistic to be a super user who rethinks the entire reality that you're in while you're still learning to prompt. So I think we're a bit ridiculous sometimes when it comes to AI, putting that out there. But then I think that the fact that this tool exists and has that potential, and everyone is trying to figure out reimagining it, you have to be pushing yourself harder. You have to be thinking that challenging that what you did that looks so cool is actually not a differentiator and not going to make you shine in the market. And you have to be able to challenge people who think that continuous improvement is true transformation. And I see that tub where someone's like, look, I just put this assistant here, I put that there. It's like, great, you're doing the exact same thing faster. But what if you didn't do it at all that way? And I think that's the point what we're seeing CEOs and boards looking for, is that reimagination, and a lot of people are still tweaking what they currently do. Like that's the present moment.
So this question might be sort of a continuation on of that. But when we talk to CHROs, they're not really confused by whether or not they should use AI. They're getting tons and tons of pressure to use AI. But the how is varied depending on who's asking them to do it, right? So they're hearing it from their board, they're hearing it from their vendors, they're hearing it from their employees, all of this pressure on CHROs to sort of make AI work in the organization or to use AI, which I think is really interesting because it is, as you mentioned, the tail wagging the dog, right? We're not saying, hey, we need to reduce turnover. Hey, here's a tool that can help us do that. We're saying, hey, here's AI. What should we use it for? So I'm wondering, what does that look like in your experience and in the experience of some of your peers?
Well, it's interesting because I was at an HR peer forum and I was talking about AI, and I asked this group of from all various companies, but many of them large organizations and some smaller ones. And I said, how many people here feel that they are behind when it comes to AI? And literally every hand went up. We're talking hundreds of people. And I said, it's not possible that we're all behind. I think that this perception that there is this thing that I'm not touching that exists is causing a lot of anxiety in our peer group right now, because it's also not even clear, what does technology own and what do I own? How do I understand how the two of us have to work together to make this work? When I can tell you in my history, technology was a team we supported. It wasn't somebody I worked with intimately unless we were doing an HRIS implementation. I'm taking this back. So the fact that the two of us are sitting together talking about something that we both own, that in itself is transformative for me. Just that. That's what I'm talking about, the present. That's just shocking. The fact that he and I have a wonderful CTO are together, sharing a screen, talking about something. And so the pressure I think here is that everybody wants to see outcomes. Initially, the pressure was to choose your tool set and to get the governance. Then the pressure was to make sure people were using the tool set. And then bang, 5 seconds later, it's like, now show me the outcome, show me how this is actually transforming us. And I think it's just that the speed of which we've come to choosing a tool, learning the tool, show that it's value, that's where I think people are feeling that. And at the same time, we're trying to figure out how to use it in our roles and for our own teams. Forget about transforming everybody else.
Yeah. It was interesting. I was on actually a briefing from the Qualtrics team today, and they do an annual trends study like many of us do. But they had a question about pressure and AI. And what they found was that for those employees, and this is like a sample of 32,000 people, that for those employees where there was a high degree of pressure to adopt AI, they did have higher levels of adoption of whatever company allowed AI tool was there. But they also had much higher levels of adoption of shadow AI. So other AI tools that they went out and got, because I think to your point, there's this expectation, you do this, you deliver results. And if they can't figure out how to deliver the results immediately, they're going to go find another tool that will. But is it safe? Is it secure? Is it all these other things? No, but the pressure is so great that they're doing this. I just found it fascinating.
That is a really interesting piece here. And I do think that for us, like most organizations, the beginning, the shadow use was more because there was a fear that I'm going to look like I'm copying or cheating. Because it was like this idea from university, which is there's going to be some way where we can detect AI was used and you're going to get caught. So people wanted to use their own, whatever subscription and then present it at work. And then the narrative changed again. Like I said, everything changes right away. So don't fall in love with it. Was the person who doesn't use AI will be replaced by the person who uses AI. And suddenly everybody's like, I did this with AI. I did this with AI. Because this is now what you're supposed to say. And we're talking maybe 8 weeks between the two. And that's why I see the row works fast. And so, in our world, what we had, because we're a tech company, and I know that does put me in advantage when I'm talking to my colleagues, is that our CTO, like I said, is a true innovator. And he actually introduced our version of Copilot a year before Copilot was launched. So we had our own employee that was embedded in Teams that you could just ask his questions and was basically an assistant. And when I think you're talking about shadow, the discussion really was early on, use our tool. And if our tool isn't good enough, then we'll improve it. And created like a Gen AI studio where if you were building an agent, you could pull from the other tools yourself. And so they were available, but through the platform. And because we do security services, it's highly discouraged for us to use other tools. And so I think because of the service we provide, we were fortunate that I think there was less of that behavior just because of how we've been indoctrinated into keeping our company secure and having access to tools at the same time and being told we're watching how much you use them to make sure you use them a lot.
Yeah. Well, I think I heard you talk about a story about how the leaders actually tried to flip that dynamic.
Yes.
Can you share a little bit about what that was?
Well, it was interesting, and this had nothing to do with me. So I wasn't exactly early on the AI wagon. I can tell you that I was a passenger, as I am on most technology launches, unless it's HR tech. It's like, that's your tech, this is my tech. I don't need to know what marketing tech is. It's like irrelevant to me. This is why AI is so interesting, because it's across all of our functions. So initially, our CTO did a town hall. And this was in 2023, which is 40 years ago now. And he put up, he explained what Gen AI was, showed some examples, I think using a cat. Like, this is what a cat is, and this is what Gen AI does with a cat. And it's great because everybody loves AI cats. Just so you know, he really, he spoke to me in that moment. And, what he did is he was showing us how to use it and that we'd embedded this new employee. And he did a hackathon right there. And the hackathon, and I was just there as a participant, not as an executive. I was just watching it. And it said, listen, now that you know what it is, submit your ideas and the technology team will build it. And the winners are the people whose ideas are going to be built. So as opposed to people having fear of automation of their job, it was like a competition. And I think my team submitted over 20 business cases to automate all of their functions. They were like, please have at it. And then we won one. We won an onboarding bot. And we called them bots then, not agents. That was a different term. And so, by, I would say, introducing it that way, having a competition, having us judge it, having prizes. And then my CEO, who's also very technically proficient, he told a story about an agent he created. I was like, he's already creating agents? Like, I literally was like, oh no. And he showed on a call, how he's using it and talking about it. So there was transparency and there was excitement and there was examples of, look at how cool it is that I didn't write this myself, that got me over the fear I had myself of showing teams and using things and talking about AI. And then last thing I'll say is even with my team, on Valentine's Day, I made a Valentine's card using AI and put it in our chat and had everybody make by the end of the day, the cards were like so way better than the one I put in. So I think as a leadership team, we just made it fun and we also made it really open.
So I have kind of a follow-up, and this is where we're going to go off the script as we told you we would. One of our mega trends this year is authenticity. Like we were saying, organizations want to come back to this idea of authenticity, and we're seeing it both in terms of like security, like we need to know that that person is part of our organization and that they should be there, as well as authenticity from the organization, as well as authenticity from employee to employee. So for example, we're seeing a lot more return to in-person training and some of those types of things that build those relationships. One of the things that this has brought up for Stacia and I is how AI fits into that, right? So what you just mentioned, creating this culture of, yeah, it's great. We should all be using it. Let's all use it together. And it's a very authentic thing. As we look at some of maybe the traditional ways we've thought about HR and employee development, there's maybe a danger of the hollowed out employee or the hollowed out leader, meaning they're using AI so much and AI is making all the decisions and they're acting on what AI is telling them, but maybe some of the critical thinking or the decision making and some of that stuff isn't part of the human, it's part of the technology. And I was wondering if, number one, you've seen any of that. Number two, just, at a 30,000 foot, what you think about that idea?
Such a good question, Danny. Going back again in my time tunnel when AI was just like, people were just talking about the first ones, I went to a round table and one of the CHROs there talked about how her CEO had got up and told everybody how great AI was because he'd written his performance reviews in 2 hours instead of 10 days. And I kind of felt like the vomit emoji come out of my face. I was like, oh, he told the whole company that AI wrote their reviews. Like, how good would somebody feel about that? And, while most of our tools have like tips and they actually help you write things and they have some, answers, there's already early AI in these things beforehand. I did wonder about what happens to the messiness of humanity. And I actually put a post on LinkedIn, not to advertise myself, but I called it the death of the paragraph. Like, the paragraph has gone into 2 lines, then 2 lines, then, 2 words, and then 3 lines. And then, and I was like, oh, for God's sake, what happened to just people rambling? Like, I miss rambling. So back to what you're saying now, I think at first we went a bit too much. And everybody was using it for everything. And every email was beautifully written. And then there was everything in bold. And then people started saying, you better not have bold or M dashes because then we know AI wrote it. So I feel like we self-regulated or self-corrected fairly fast, where the term AI slop starts to be attributed to people who are just using an AI output without customization or thought. And so there was a brief window where you were hearing, you wouldn't even need a PhD anymore because AI can do it, to where I would say expertise is even more valued, because if you don't have expertise, then what you're putting out looks hollow. And only expertise and thought and true sort of scrutiny can you put back in enough of your own examples and your own customization to truly still look smart. So I do think there was a moment there where everybody was just being very hollow, but I do see now that's being called out and that there's much more of a push to use your influence and your specific examples and organization and not just put out generic stuff.
Okay. I think it's interesting. One of the things that from the L&D standpoint, sorry, Stacia, I just jumped right in again, is this idea of, do we know it's human or do we not? Right. And so we're seeing vendors and some other people actually say, hey, this was written by AI and edited by humans, or, these sort of things. But I'm wondering if the nuance of AI is becoming recognizable to humans. And I think in some level it is, like the bold and the M dashes. I really miss M dashes, by the way. I miss them a lot. Well, great. But maybe like a cell phone, like when the vibrate first happened, no one heard them. And now I can hear mine in the car, in the garage at night. You know what I mean? Because now I'm attuned to it. I'm wondering if some of these AI signals are becoming more obvious to us.
If you're a senior people leader, you know the hard part isn't finding ideas. It's deciding which ones are worth acting on. That's why Red Thread created Summit 2026. It's not a conference, it's a small, invitation-only working retreat. On June 23rd, senior HR leaders will gather in Snowbird, Utah for 3 days of guided, peer-driven work grounded in research. No keynotes, no vendor pitches, no passive audiences. Leaders will leave having strengthened the people strategies they've been grappling with for years, with clearer direction on what to change, what to stop, and what to double down on. If you want to be part of that conversation, learn more and request an invitation over at redthreadresearch.com.
Well, I think they are already. And I think this is why it's so fast. That's why I talk about the present, is that if you heard something I would have said or written a year ago, I would have talked about using AI without necessarily filtering it, because that was what everybody was saying, is you can just do fast, you can do a lot, just get that done and move on. And now I'm talking about, listen, if it doesn't demonstrate expertise and it's not highly curated to your environment, your business, and your customer, then you're actually going to turn people off. And what I think is interesting is that you can prompt and do really elegant prompting and actually have done a lot of work on the output. But if it still presents itself in an AI vibe, people just gloss over and go, oh, AI wrote this. They don't say it's bad, not useful. They just, ugh. And so I think what we were telling everybody to use, what we didn't do is frame the fact that how you're going to persuade and how you're going to get attention to what you're saying still requires that extra layer of work. So now it's sort of like the research was done, and now you're going to have to do your analysis and your presentation. And I'll even say this, I love what you said earlier about going back to live training. I talked to my team and said, I still want everything presented in a PowerPoint presented to me live. So I actually made them go back and do more work when in fact they could have just cut and paste. But I said, this is how I want things to be done. And now I'm getting kind of gorgeous PowerPoints from people who are really well presenting. And I know that they got a lot of help in it. But the fact that you have to then put it in a document and then book a meeting with me and then walk me through it, it's forcing that layer of customization and thought that I wasn't getting in that early stage when I just said use it all the time.
Can I ask you one more question and then I'll give Stacia a chance? Do you think we're actually more efficient? Are we getting more work done with it? Or is it better or is it just different?
You're asking such good questions because I actually ponder these in my own time walking my dog. And I ponder like whether we are better or not. What I can say is that the research aspect is so great. I'll be like, find me an article that was written in this time, in this industry that has this statistic. And it's like, bang, bang, bang. Now, half the links are dead, just so you know, eventually that'll work. So you got to click on them. But I find the part of the work that I had to do to dig around and formulate and put it in an Excel and cross and compare, that is making me more efficient. But the actual work of getting it presented and putting it out there is still pretty much the same. So when you're saying efficient, I feel now I get sometimes too much too fast with people, and I don't have a bigger brain or time to filter through it. And the quantity quality battle is certainly going, but I do think the quality of what's in the business case, that I think is going faster. I think how many hours are we really saving? That's still being debated.
All right. Well, let's move on to lightning round. The first question we have is, what day in your life would you like to relive?
Yeah, I think there's defining moments. My father was a big storyteller. I come from a line of storytellers, and he called it pivotal moments, where there are moments in your life that you think something happened to you that sent you on a certain course. And not every moment is like that. And I was thinking, for me in that moment, I was in my early 30s and I was doing a presentation at a conference. And at that time, it was when Children's Place and Disney stores were coming together. So it was at Disney, which is like this huge high power place. And, everything at Disney is so hyped. And I got the opportunity to do a talk on recruiting. And I was up there and I was actually pregnant. So I felt a bit like a pregnant woman, a Canadian in an American company, like just kind of like I'm out of my league here, really nervous. And the president of Disney Stores came up right after and he made a joke like, oh, hard act to follow. I got to get some tips from her. And everybody laughed. And I was like, oh, so flattered, whatever. But I'd say this changed my life because there was probably 1,000 people there. He came and found me after, sat me down and actually asked me for tips.
Wow.
Wow.
It still gives me goosebumps when I think about it. It was a moment where I felt more validated than I think I've ever felt my entire life. It was a moment where I thought, this is what I'm meant to do, and I'm good at this, and I'm going to be proud of myself, and I'm not ever going to devalue myself. It was like I don't know if he probably doesn't remember that moment, but it changed the course of my life. I decided I'm a public speaker, and that's who I am.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Second question. If you could make an office rule that everyone has to follow for one day, what would it be?
So funny. Anybody who is on my team would say, rules doesn't make any rules. I would say, this is going to sound mean. Am I allowed to sound mean? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I have a big smile when I'm doing it. It's when people send you a Teams message that says hi or hi, Des, and then just waits for you to answer. And I'm like, what? And especially if it's like 2 hours later and I just have a hi, I'm like, what do you want? Just say hi. I need this from you. Are you available? I've got it. Like, instead of hanging hi, I would just make that not allowed.
Yeah. I get those on LinkedIn. And I'm like, what?
Don't you have a visceral reaction to it? They're like, what? Like, what? Yeah.
Or sometimes I'll get, hi, how are you?
Yes.
Different messages. And I'm like, fine. What do you need?
I know, exactly. I just want to say, what? What do you need? What do you want? And then they'll say, oh, it's okay. I didn't get you then. So I'm just saying that would be the thing I would stop doing.
Yeah. I second that. All right. What songs have you completely memorized?
I think we all have like karaoke songs or songs from our childhood, but I think probably the one that's most unusual for me is Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles. And I have to tell you, in my wedding, we didn't have a band. We had a string quartet and they had a list of songs. And when we were meeting with them before, I saw Eleanor Rigby was on and I said, like, just everything's fine, but not that song. It's my wedding and it's by somebody who dies at a church alone, right? Why would you play that at someone's wedding? And so at the wedding, they played it not once, not twice, but 3 times. I had Eleanor Rigby played 3 times at my wedding. And I remember—
Did you pay them?
I just remember being so upset. But the funny part is that it's now our song. Like, it's literally the song, my husband and I's wedding song. And it's on like our family playlist and our kids love it. And in the end, it's like such a defining song to have as your wedding song. And when people say, "Oh, what was your song?" and I get to say Eleanor Rigby, I should pay them double for how funny this is, because I'm almost married 30 years and it's still making me laugh. And I love making people laugh. And they gave me the funniest story by playing Eleanor Rigby 3 times at my wedding.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. But here's my question. How long did it take you to find it funny?
I'll tell you when, and I'm not lying. I probably never said this out loud to a public group. You know what, you wonder who's going to die first in your marriage? And my husband and I were talking about something, and I said, the one perk of the person who doesn't die first, they'll get to play Eleanor Rigby at their funeral and tell the wedding story song. And that's for the first time I thought about it. He was like, "Oh my God, that will be so funny." I was like, "Yeah, as you know, whoever is lucky enough to be alive gets to be the one to pull that stunt." And I think that's when I realized it was a super funny story.
That's awesome.
So the way that you've described AI being used in your organization, it's a lot of, hey, use this to be a better whatever. Use this to do more of the thing that you already do in your job. Stacia and I have talked about AI, little AI and big AI. Little AI is that sort of coach on the shoulder that helps you do better in the job that you have, with the same structure you have, and the same sort of access to data that you have. More and more organizations are looking at strategic and systemic AI. And I'm wondering if your organization is thinking in those terms, and if so, how?
Initially, when you started talking about like the 3 layers of AI for us, what was really interesting is we put out our AI strategy, and our CEO and our CTO put it out and said, listen, and it was really well laid out. It was like, there's 3 ways that AI is going to be brought to life in an organization. There's the department initiatives, which is really what we mostly think about, which are how do we become more efficient and leverage our new technology? And then here are our customer value, how we're going to deliver more value to our customer. And the third one was, how are we going to transform in terms of the margins, in terms of how we operate? And what was interesting about that is that then we said, okay, then there's different teams and different frameworks to achieve each of those. And I think a lot of organizations think the bottom up of training your people is going to do all 3 of those. We're going to give everybody tools. They're going to, transform themselves, the business, and our customers. And so our technology team was put to the task of really working with the business experts to reimagine the business. And in my world, I took on enabling everybody on the tool set. And in the enablement, we made it in 3 levels. One was just mastering the productivity part. And the second one was understanding how to transform a process or your role. So our enablement that we created with our own videos, using our own tools, with our own people, was level 1 is here's use cases for how to be more productive. And then here's use cases for how to transform either your role or yourself. And then the last thing we did is we created an AI champion role, which is somebody who got to go to a boot camp, who sits in each department, who can help realize those more, I would say, difficult or challenging tasks. So you're not limited by what you yourself can think of or build. And so we did that enablement across our organization in under 6 months.
So when you think about sort of that enablement and these 3 levels, which I think are really interesting, I mean, there's tremendous pressure to do something with AI right now, right? Like, everybody needs to do something with AI. And a lot of times we default to easy to implement things. But some of these larger initiatives, the ones that you're talking about, actually take different plumbing and different access to data and those types of things. Is your organization on board with that? Like, we got to fix all of these things in order to make it work. And what drove them there? Like, how did everybody get on the same page about that?
So we had an offsite, and everybody had to, the senior team, create an AI roadmap. And funnily enough, I kid you not, I was working on the offsite and we were putting the roadmap template in Excel. And this is just the irony. And our CTO was like, "You're doing an AI roadmap manually?" Like, just like with such disgust, I was like, "Sorry, like, that's all I know how to do." And so he had his team work with me and with a colleague of mine named Becky to create an AI roadmap assistant where you put in what your job is and what you want to transform, and it interacted with you to create your own AI roadmap. and to then put the feasibility and the complexity of how hard it would be to get it done. And then they showed us in a 2x2 box, what's reality if you were doing it and what would actually require cycles and technology. And then our technology team and our CEO would decide what made it to them. And the rest was up to you. And that's when I thought of AI champions. I was like, if that's up to me, just so you know, if that's what you think I'm going to do, that's never going to happen. So then I was like, what if I gave you a bunch of people that you trained and then they come back to me? And this was really, really fast. And this is just how funny our team is. It all happens in like one meeting. But what's great about the pace of things is people are willing to try anything now. Before it would have been like, well, I don't know. I didn't see that happen over there. They're like, sure. I was like, sure. I was like, better write a job description, back to you over here. I think that there's a tremendous openness to try things. And I think people in my role have to not be self-conscious to throw out ideas, because I think there's an appetite from all levels to try to win at this, and winning looks different at every level of that cake I was explaining.
Mm-hmm. But it does bring an interesting question, which is you want to create that room for experimentation and sure, and let's try. But, the longer we get into this cycle, that can turn into kind of noise or shadow workflows, unnecessary risk. One thing I was talking to someone about, and they're like, well, the problem is we all experimented. We went wide, but we didn't then reconsolidate into like, okay, here's actually the best 6 ideas out of this. Let's go do those things. So what do you see as kind of the CHRO's role in both enabling that experimentation, that expansion, and then that coming back together around the ideas that are going to drive the greatest impact?
Well, I think the thing that we were talking about earlier on is understanding what is the continuous improvement productivity game and what is true reimagination. You asked me at the beginning, are you reimagining? I said, I think a lot of people don't even know what reimagining is. And one of the biggest challenges our CTO and CEO make is that they would say to me, those ideas belong with you in the department initiatives. They were really, I would say, really clear and tough on what is true reimagination that requires cycles and investment, and what are things that would be great if you could figure out, but it's not necessarily going to hit our bottom line. And I think if you don't have that filter and people who can see the difference, you can get caught in a lot of activity and be like I've read these articles, 95% of these agents don't bring any value. And everybody was saying I had I won't mention a company, but they had 12,000 agents. And I was like, that doesn't mean anything. So I think if you don't have a clear understanding of what success looks like in each of those buckets, and you can actually tell people, this is great if you can do it, but this is true transformation. And we really just put our true resources around a very few number of projects that we think will transform what we deliver and transform how we deliver it. And then the rest, they literally say, that belongs to you, to me. And I kind of laugh because there are really good ideas, but it means that's for the AI champions or for our enablement program to solve. So in part of our champions bootcamp, we have a VP of technology. His name is Matt. It's great. He actually did a really candid session with them. And just, I went to Champions Bootcamp, which is just hysterical because I don't even know how to do a pivot table. So just laugh at that. So I'm at Champions Bootcamp.
That's right. AI is going to do it for you now. You're fine.
Anybody can be an expert. So I was like, I'm going to go. And I listened to him as they brought the ideas that their department roadmaps had, because you have this roadmap assistant, so everybody has a roadmap. And he was like, yeah, that requires integration and different data sets. And that would take a developer 6 months. However, you could do a kind of hacked version that would give you something. And he sort of made it realistic for them, but also explained back to your data sets, like certain things require a lot of integration. And that if that was something we would do, we have to get the backing of the organization for it. But here's a smaller version you could do. And so one of our entire half-day sessions was on understanding that part. And then the champions then felt supported so they could challenge with, I can't do it, but I can't do those integrations, but here's something I could do. And we're meeting quarterly with them to support them. And they have a Teams chat. And it's just new. Like, listen, I tell you, I talk about the present. This is today. I just believe that we'll iterate on even that role and how that role works, and we're going to get it right. You have to be willing to try something. You're not going to win at a concept. You're going to win at your iterative process. That's what I believe when it comes to AI in organizations right now.
What about measurement? How are you measuring the success of some of these things?
So interestingly, you should say that. I feel like you're in my head right now, Danny. So then I had launched all my training and we had 80% completion. Like literally, I was like, wow, this is amazing, because everybody wanted to go. That's also shocking for L&D. If you build it, they will come. It's not how learning works. We built it and people were like, thank you. Thank you. In fact, people were telling me that their spouses were pissed off that their companies weren't doing that for them. Like, this is the kind of thing where they were like, I need to learn this. And then I realized after that I had missed a module, which is how to set a goal, productivity goal or transformation goal, so that you could show and demonstrate that. So we're launching that now. And our AI roadmap assistant was adapted to be able to then turn it into a SMART goal and then find you a stretch goal to do with now the time that you've saved. And that's going to be how we measure my part. When it comes to the organization part, we have a way of calculating and measuring impact. And so I think that it's important that you have a form of measurement in order to not confuse activity with actual outcomes, which is really what the first year was about.
And so has your organization maybe rethought with how they think about productivity?
I think it's an interesting one because when I initially launched AI enablement, I did a pilot with my team and we used our learning platform that's basically a mass learning platform. I don't want to plug anybody here. I put it out to my team and it was like garbage. Just so you know, watching a bunch of YouTube videos does not train anybody anything. And I cut it off, killed my pilot, and I had worked with our developer who developed our internal tool. And he actually did the productivity use cases using our OKRs, our strategy, our documents, our language, our screens. And people were like, it blew their mind. So he would have one prompt in terms of, here, I want to do goal setting, or I want to do research, or I want to answer a customer ticket. And each of his prompts lasted 15 minutes, 12 minutes. He'll go back and forth and back and forth. And I think it let people understand that this isn't a one-shot, straight-shot prompt. This is an iterative approach. And so I do think that we'll be in a better position to measure because we really focused on about 8 cases of how to use it. And those are what we opened up. But I think the tracking of productivity gains is something I still think we're struggling a little bit to do.
I think the way that we've measured productivity over the long term probably needs to change based on the world's moving.
I agree.
So moving a little bit to looking up, if you will, if a board was to ask you, are we AI ready? Which is like such a big question, but still, what's the non-obvious answer you'd want them to understand?
So I think when we talk about AI ready, what I was saying to you before, that has been changing what that means. AI ready a year and a half ago is, do we have the right tools and security and guardrails? AI ready is, does everybody know how to use it? And then what's AI ready today? And AI ready today is, do we understand where we need to focus in order to get the best bottom line result from it? So I think AI readiness has changed dependent on when it's being asked. And I think what's being asked now, if you read everything that's out there, you look what's happening in our own organization, is show me how what we're doing will or should in this year create new value for the organization, either in new customer value or in an emergent value. And I think that's what AI ready is today. And that's a pretty fast switch from what AI ready was just 18 months ago when we were excited by the tools and excited by pilots. I think AI readiness now has really jumped tremendously. It's as if it was gradual and then sudden.
So when you say AI readiness, at least at this moment, as of our podcast recording, is the ability to understand where you're going to drive value in the organization with AI.
I know exactly where we're going to be narrowing our focus. And this is what we're developing on. And this is where we see the project timeline and where we think we can say it's going to turn on value. Like, it really specific. It went from being really general to like, here are the 3 projects. They aim at three spots. And this is what it's going to look like when it's done. I think that's what I see as AI ready now, which is, again, a new conversation for 2026 for most organizations.
And so in your mind, does that include a financial value? So we're going to pull the project in 3 months or whatever?
I think it's the idea that even if you can't necessarily say, because you don't necessarily see value in the moment something is, because you have to tweak it and fix it, but you can show where the value will start to turn. So at this point, it should turn on value. Once we have these pieces running, it should. And that monetization is certainly something that's important because there's been a tremendous investment in time and tools without having that in most organizations. I talk to my peers, and there comes a point where people are like, okay, fun's over. Show me how this is going to impact us. And I think that impact right now, initially the impact we used to hear about those Jews articles was that you won't need your people anymore. Now it's show me how you're going to drive more value or transform processes. And so I think that's where the pressure is right now. It's to be able to show that you're narrowing your focus and that all that playing showed you where to point the laser, and you're pointing the laser and it's going to break through at this point. And I can predict it reliably that it will give me something in this period of time.
One of our other megatrends this year is this idea that AI is becoming ambient. It's becoming part of the air we breathe. It's becoming less noticeable because it's part of the things that we do, right? It's been baked into the technology that we buy, and we're using it to do things just second nature and all that good stuff. And I'm wondering two things. First of all, how long is it before we quit talking about AI and we get back to doing the things that we need to do, right? So I don't see your job as CHRO actually much different than it was 4 years ago. We just now have this huge AI thing that's enabling some of the work. Please tell me if I'm wrong there. So that's my first question. And the second question that I have is, should we hold organizations accountable to AI goals? Or should we be thinking more about their goals and encouraging AI, but not necessarily mandating AI in order to get them done?
I think you're probably a year away when you say that. I think we're still in a point where we're going to be saying this, we need you to use it and think about it. And AI use and AI, that side of enablement, we're still there. That we don't yet, and this is an interesting thing about technology, is that what is the basic level that we expect everybody to have in terms of their proficiency? And then what's the super user? And that's still being defined right now. And so I think this time is saying, your AI goal is to ensure that we have a base proficiency so that we can just build on that. And that's what's happening. And I would say next year, I would see our goal setting be more about expecting you to have far more goals in terms of either doing things faster or doing more. And it won't be about AI anymore. It'll be what's your stretch goal? Your strategy was a 2-year strategy. Why can't you get it done in 6 months? And that's going to be because you have this baseline use of this technology that's made you more efficient. But I think we're still in the year of creating goals around learning AI and using AI and having that in the wording. And then you're going to come up later and be, I could see myself this time next year say, all right, now your goal is how are you transforming what you're doing, reimagining, using all those words that I showed you at the beginning. I think those will become the base expectation, but we're not there yet. I think we're still in that stage.
So kind of a follow-up question to that. One of the things that we are seeing in the people functions is that everything's sort of collapsing in on itself, right? It's hard to have a development discussion without also talking about workforce planning and all of these things. It's all coming into one discussion. And we're even seeing with AI that also goes to IT. And you said you were sitting down with your IT counterpart in ways that you haven't before, right? And that's true in operations, and that could be true of sales. And so everything seems to be becoming one discussion instead of many. Where are goals going to sit? If this is true, if AI is enabling the work, even if we just take HR, AI is enabling HR, but not well enough to actually get the, retention better. And where do goals sit? Do we have to rethink that too?
Well, I think if I understand you, I see that what I see us doing and really thinking about differently that I feel is happening already is an understanding of AI that has to be strong enough to know what work it does really well and where it sits in your org chart and where it doesn't. And, one of the things I've said is often whenever there's a new project, a new piece of anything, people are like, I need headcount. I think that we're going to be challenged to be able to say, all right, new work means we need resources towards that work. What's the right resource to use? Do we have a technology answer, or how long or hard would it be to get that? Or is this something we need in headcount? And I think that we need to be thinking about that as we set our goals in terms of what we're going to do in terms of work and deliverables, is we need to be also able to demonstrate our knowledge of who should be doing that work and where we want to invest. Is it in a person, or is it in developing a technology or purchasing a technology that can do it? I think that was already happening, to be honest. I think it's just happening at a much larger scale across all functions. The idea of project managers and assistants for projects, we have all these tools that do that now. I can't remember when that happened, but it happened. And so I think that we're just more aware of that happening right now. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I think we need to be really clear as we plan for our needs in terms of our goals. What are our goals and how do we need to accomplish them? We have to understand enough the technologies around us. We probably already did, but the pressure's on now to invest in the right response to the right kind of work.
Dessalen, we could talk forever, I think, but we are at our time, unfortunately. Thank you so much for talking to us about where you are in this moment, in this present. And we want to finish up with the final question, which is one that we ask every podcast guest that comes on our podcast. And that is, why do you do the work that you do?
I ended up in this role before it was really a role. It was called personnel when I came out. That's like a crazy time, called personnel. They were just trying to call it human resources to make it seem valuable. And now you're not allowed to use that term. Could do a whole skit on the terminology shifts in my lifetime. Why do I do the work I do? I'm really fortunate that I love working with ideas and people and inspiring and being creative. And I somehow found a job that has that focuses on common sense, but also is expected to dream and imagine and have a vision. And I just feel really fortunate because while people talk about trying to get a seat at the table, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I bring a chair in every room I go. And doing important things is a fundamental need for every human being. And I believe that if we can bring joy and purpose and imagine new work for people, like, what a gift to be able to bring that. And no matter how doomsday this narrative can be out there, I refuse to go down that path. I think we're going to find a way to make this be something amazing for us. And so I do this work almost to counteract all that negativity, whether it was around flex work or anything I've ever heard over time. I'm a trainer. E-learning didn't put me out of business. Like, I just think in the end, I use this line from Toni Morrison, in the end, everything's going to be okay. If it's not okay, it's not the end. I just feel like I'm just very lucky to be able to influence the work life of so many people in a positive way. I mean that from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. If this podcast got you thinking differently about how work happens, that's what we're here for. We dig into these topics every week in our research and in the Red Thread community. The Red Thread community is a place where people, leaders, and practitioners come together to compare notes, share what's working, and maybe challenge those things that aren't working so well. You can join for free at redthreadresearch.com/membership. Or if you or your organization are ready to go deeper, take a look at our professional and our enterprise memberships. For professional tier, for listeners, you can use the promotional code STORIES, STORIES, for a 10% discount. And if you're a tech provider trying to make sense of this space, our tech consortium is where smart vendors are coming together to learn from each other and from the market. You'll find everything at redthreadresearch.com. I'm Danny Johnson. Thanks for listening and for caring about making work better.
Okay, that's a wrap for this episode of Workplace Stories. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to our podcast so that you can be the first to know about future episodes. For exclusive access to our research, insights, and a vibrant network of human capital leaders, consider joining the Red Thread Research community. Visit redthreadresearch.com to learn more and to take your workplace to the next level.